Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was created by Mark, who's an advanced photographer from California. Mark shot this image with a Canon Powershot G10, an effective focal length of about 180 millimeters, exposure trio, ISO 125 f4.5, and 1/320th of a second. Mark says this is a photo of Yorba Buena Island in a passing sailboat and was taken while walking along San Francisco Bay. San Francisco, he says he waited for the boat to separate from the island. He wanted to capture the beautiful evening light and the fog on the island and the boat. And this is the original capture. And then Mark took this and he processed it in Lightroom 3 to brighten the exposure and sharpen. And he used a gradient of exposure to selectively lighten the boat while maintaining the saturation and the island. He also cropped to make the shot more of a panoramic. And here is Mark's finished shot right here. I want to come back to comparing these two versions in just a second, but I want to go back to the unprocessed JPEG, and I want to start here and talking about the image. One potential powerful takeaway here is just the fact that Mark shot this with a smaller camera, and it sounds like that he may have just been walking along, and because he had a camera and he saw something that was motivating to him as a photographer, he was able to take the picture. Bigger, heavier DSLRs, and then if we start to put a few lenses in a pack, all of that can inhibit us from taking pictures. It can mean that the gear turns us into the kind of photographer that only allows ourselves to go out and photograph when we are, in quotes, just photographing, not when we're having a life. And so one of the potential powerful takeaways from this video is, number one, carrying your camera with you all the time. And if your regular camera is too big and too bulky to support that mindset or to support you in doing that, then getting a smaller point and shoot camera could be a great way to just be more consciously productive as a photographer. A lot of things that I like about the image. I could definitely see Mark being motivated by the scene. Beautiful quality of light back here hitting the fog, pouring over the island. Beautiful color. One of the things I really like in this image is how the implication of shape here, this real powerful sort of arrow shape, is rhyming the shape of the sails and also of the boat itself. Not only are these shapes rhyming each other, there's an implied energy obviously here that goes together in terms of the direction of the boat and the implied direction that this shape is pushing towards in the image. The other thing that I'm really enjoying is this difference between warm and cool. So there's a beautiful sense of color depth based on some areas of the image being cool blue or cool cyan, and then these really beautiful reds and magentas that are coming in where the light is hitting in the clouds. And there is a nice sense of separation here and sort of leading line as this comes down to sort of push out towards the boat and meet the boat. Some really beautiful textures here. If you look at the way textures are playing out, smooth and the rough of the water and different textures, all these different subjects, I'm enjoying that. Looks like Mark in his processing has tried to add more value to the boat. So he's brightened the boat. We know that the mind's eye will go to the area or areas of highest contrast and then bright areas. Those two things have a lot of value. So in brightening the boat, Mark is trying to push towards this more as a main subject. What's interesting to me in this processing is I definitely like how the boat is taking on more weight, but and using a gradient here and sort of not applying the lightening locally to the boat, the sky has gotten very bright, and that now is really pulling my eye in a way that it wasn't before. And even with brightening the boat in a color file, this red back in here still has a lot more weight than the idea of the boat itself. I really feel like in looking at this image that the boat is a main subject. It's not only closer, it looks like the boat is where Mark has focused. So it's hard to imagine this being a main subject. It seems more like a beautiful background. But for me, something has happened here because the beautiful background has the most exciting quality of light, has the color that has the highest value both from a frequency standpoint and from an emotional standpoint, and there's a lot of contrast back there. All of these things mean that the background to me is actually much heavier in either version of these shots than the main subject of the boat. And I'm not saying that you always have to do it this way. The guidelines are there because they remind us of natural law. They remind us of things that on average are true. They can give us a framework, but they're just that. They're guidelines, and it's very, very hard to talk about anything that could be applied to every shot. That's an understatement for all time. But when I am working traditionally, what do I mean by that? I mean photographing a beautiful scene in a beautiful way. So trying to make a statement about beauty, a lot of times going above and beyond what's actually there, not just documenting, but trying to use camera placement and quality of light and moment, all these different elements of art, design, and also photographic design to come up with a principle in design that does make a statement that's maybe even more than what we're seeing. When I'm working traditionally, so much of the time, I do want the highest value ideas from a design standpoint to be connected to my main subject. And as beautiful as the scene is, and as much as I like it just the way it came out of the camera right here, I think this is a beautiful shot. In my perfect world, this would be the other way around. The light would actually be hitting the boat, and the background part back here would be very dark and very moody. Maybe I'd get really lucky and there would be light that's split, light that's hitting the water out here and light that is hitting in the background, so that the contrast, the most value of light, highest value of light, most contrast, brightest, and the most exciting color is actually connected to my main subject instead of the background. One of the things that I might have looked at doing here, if I was watching this play out and I was sort of thinking about composition, I might have tried to shoot a variation where I was much wider on the zoom that Mark has on this lens. And my thinking would be that if I do something that's very environment dominant and I have an enormous amount of negative space, then shooting at 28 I would imply more depth of field. If I shot at the wide end of this zoom that Mark has on the G10 where everything might look sharp, so there's not a sense that this has been focused on and this is a background. The negative space and just more space all the way around in every direction, left, right, and top, would also mean that overall in the composition, this bit of color and the light back there and all that would have less weight compared to everything else. And I'd just be really interested to see what would happen in this same compositional idea where you have these two things in the bottom of the shot. Then you made a statement about negative space, and you have an enormous amount of negative space. Maybe you shoot very wide and have a lot of sky. How that might allow the boat to come into play in a different way. Don't know. Would have to see the variation. My quick take on this was a little bit different than Mark's. It was to subtly brighten the boat, but to actually darken the top part of the shot to try and contain the eye, to try and create sort of a sandwich of darker ideas at the top and the bottom that might help to corral the idea and tie all this together a little bit more. I've done it in a very, very rough way and on purpose to sort of over-exaggerate my point. I think you can definitely see that I've darkened the top of the image and that I've tried to create a little bit more contrast and movement that goes along, that runs right over the boat to try and connect these ideas instead of feeling so much like I'm getting pulled past the boat to the background. And I feel like that in the original shot and even in this other shot because the sky has become so bright. Like I said, I love where Mark started. Well seen, really beautiful qualities of light, beautiful color, fantastic subject matter, beautiful shot. So a big thank you to Mark for submitting this image. Big thank you to you for being here. Hope to see you again very soon on The Mindful Eye, another episode of the Daily Critique.